This is the Page Publishing Book Club. Good evening. How you doing? I love this. I saw this band last weekend, as a matter of fact. You got to look for Chevy Lopez. They play around New York all the time. Chevy Lopez. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini, along with my faithful friend and engineer, Rob Barrett. Thanks for stopping by to check us out tonight. We have some real characters joining us, I got to tell you. But they have real stories and real experiences about why they wrote, what they wrote, and how the experience changed or affected their lives in some way. Bottom line, if they can do it, so can you. You can write a book, you can get it published, and that's why you're listening, right? We're going to start off with a bang tonight. If you're uncomfortable with content for mature audiences, Rob, you might want to turn down your radio for just a few minutes. Rob has his fingers in his ears. Or if you're listening on Download Fast Forward. Otherwise, feast your ears on Ronald Cruzy. He wrote a book called The Worst Was Fantastic. Hello, Ronald. Why don't we start with, what do you mean by the worst was fantastic?
Worst of making love. Why?
Well, when it comes to that.
Well, that's why I said the worst was fantastic. It's all good, some's better, and the worst was fantastic, right? Or it should be, put it that way. It's about most of my life. Let's see, when I was 15, the neighbor lady got my virginity. She was 27, and we wound up having an affair till she passed away about 52 years later. I'm 77 now, but I can still...
I believe that, but wait a second.
She was 12 years older than me.
And you continued this affair your entire life?
Yep.
Did you guys marry each other?
Oh, no. We were never married. No. I was married and had other affairs, and she was married, and we made love like 3 days before she passed. Yeah, she had cancer, and it was unreal. She was the one that taught me that you have to make sure that the lady enjoys everything. It's easy for a man, and she was right. It was just a great time. So
how did you keep this love affair going while you were married?
Well, I worked for a large corporation and traveled probably 4 or 5 days a week, and happened to travel to the city where Beth lived then. You just had to be careful and plan things, and it can work out. Can't be stupid like most people are that have affairs.
Did your wife have affairs too?
I don't know. Never ask her why. If you don't know about it, it's fine. If you know about it, it's probably different.
Did you love your wife?
Sure, I wouldn't have married her.
Basically, you can love somebody and go out and have affairs.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Or like today, if something like this, somebody say, oh, that woman took advantage of you. I don't look at it that way. I think what she taught me made me have a much better life with quite a few women. So, that's, you should read the book.
I think I will.
It's really like the one person that Page Publishing wrote. He said it's an erotic novel, follows the story of a protagonist and his sexual exploits, starting when he was de-virginized. I like how this guy writes there. De-virginized by his 26-year-old neighbor, Beth, at the age of 15 during one 4th of July encounter. And it went on with some of her other friends, and then I spent 6 years in the Air Force and went to college work. And then I was working with another gentleman, and he had up above the second floor of the office. We made a nice area. I think he was as erotic as I was, but we built this little, what we called a love nest up there. We had some overhead mirrors and a 7-foot square toss pillow. I think I've had a good life. I've enjoyed it, and I think that's what's important, right? That you enjoy life.
I think it is important. I think some people might listen to you and think, wow, what kind of a jerk is this guy? He messed around. He messed around on his wife, and if she stayed true to you. My only thing is, if you're going to mess around, then I get to mess around. And
that's no problem with that. I don't think most of the time, I don't understand some things. I don't understand today, Jesus. I just, here recently, this, 16-year-old boy was was making love with his 22-year-old teacher, and he told everybody. I thought, Jesus, guy's crazy. First of all, his teacher looked better than any teacher I ever had, but and then I hear about all these cougars, these women who are older than the man they're making love with, and that's fine. I think men should be more open to learning how to be happy with a woman, because if they're happy, he's going to be happier, and that's important. I have a lady friend now who happens to be 80, and some of the greatest sex making love. Oh,
I've heard that. I've heard that.
She's got a body like most 50-year-old people would love to have. Thank God for Viagra, it really helps an old devil. But yeah, it's great. And I feel sorry for people that maybe don't enjoy it.
I feel sorry for couples that, one's messing around and the other isn't.
If you're careful, everybody doesn't have to know that. And as I always say, you have to take care of your homework, too.
I don't think I could ever cheat on my husband. I really don't think I have the makeup. I would just feel guilty.
Yeah, well, that's fine, and as long as you're happy, that's what counts. And again, I've talked to women who said, I don't need that stuff and everything. And I said, well, you've never had any good stuff.
If you must say so yourself, right, Ronald? Interesting take on sex in marriage, outside of marriage, and in all kinds of places. I think I just broke a sweat. Woohoo! How about you, Rob? All right. You can turn your radio back up now. Kevin Duffy is a consulting engineer. In fact, he was at St. John's University when we spoke. He deals with schools and hospitals, places that have big smokestacks or big air conditioning systems, and he wrote a book called The Crew. Now, does your book have anything to do with your real job?
No, but it's kind of how in some ways, how I got here too. I'm a 1984 graduate of the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, which is where the book takes place, and it's because of that, I kind of ended up in this business. When at the academy, they teach you a lot about operating ships and large merchant ships, tankers, cargo ships, etc. Some Navy ships as well, and you get a big background into steam plant operation as well as large diesels. And when I eventually stopped sailing, that's how I got into this line of work. The Crew is actually a crew team, as in rowing a shell, like stroke. And it's sort of a coming of age story. It takes place at the academy. There's two best friends that are there. It's Christopher Kowalski and his buddy Joe Murphy, and it takes them through the fall regatta season. There are three major regattas in Crew fall, and it kind of follows them from the time they go back to the academy, because they actually have to report back in August. So it follows from August until the last race, which happens at the end of October. And it follows kind of their exploits, some good, some bad, some in between, and them and their teammates. And originally, when I started writing the story, it was supposed to be about a grudge match between the Merchant Marine Academy and the Naval Academy. But, as I started to write it, it sort of, picks up a life of its own, and it started becoming more of, like I said, a coming-of-age story. There's, a romance involving Christopher Kowalski, and he was dumped by his girlfriend, maybe 6 months before the book started. They had been together for 5 years, and, he's been in the pits, and he actually, at the first regatta, meets somebody. And, their romance blossoms. And then it also, like I said, it follows the three races that they have in the regatta season.
Okay, so it sounds like this book's been kind of floating around your head for a while. This is based on your personal experience, right?
Well, yes and no, in that it is a whole work of fiction, and the characters are purely fictional. But yeah, I did Crew when I was over at Kings Point, and I did draw on my own experiences from crewing, as well as people that I know, people that I've met. There's obviously, that's I guess what most writers would probably do. But it is a work of fiction. It didn't actually happen.
See, there's usually a catalyst. There's usually something that makes you want to write a particular book at a particular time. What was it for you?
Well, as I said, it was supposed to be about a grudge match, and the way the story ends, when they finally do race Navy, what ends up happening is actually something similar that did happen to me in one race. So that was sort of what I drew upon for the general idea for the story. And it did take probably about 20 years or so to write, maybe even 30 if I think about it, because I actually did start writing it as soon as I got out of school. I was on a ship, sat down with a spiral wound notebook, and just started writing. I wrote about 50 pages by hand, and that's as far as I got. And that notebook went with me to every ship. I never wrote in it again. It's carried in my briefcase when I stopped sailing and got a real job. I never did anything with it until about maybe 2001. I finally said, let me just sit down and write this on a computer. And I pulled the notebook out and started reading it and said, this is awful. I mean, it's horrible. So I basically had to rewrite whatever I had done. And, even as I'm writing the story and as things were changing, the storyline, the characters start to develop their own, personalities, and you start to get to know them better. And I just knew I had to go back and rewrite the things at the beginning. Do a rewrite, because now I knew my characters better.
So, and then you wound up with Paige.
Yes, I did. I kept hearing about them on the radio, and I realized getting published is very difficult. And when I actually heard about them on the radio, I did go to their website and I checked them out, and it seemed like they were definitely above self-publishing, although in a lot of ways you still were. But they were there to help you as well, with the editing and making some suggestions with the artwork, et cetera. So that's sort of why I ended up going with Paige. One thing is I did put something into the Kings Pointer alumni magazine. They had a thing they started maybe about a year ago about alumni authors, and most of the guys are writing. They're doing nonfiction work, not a fictional book. A few people that had done it, but I sent it in. And they said, "Yeah, we'll definitely run this."
Got any advice for aspiring writers?
You know if your story is good. You know if it's bad. You know if it needs to be rewritten, and you just have to make it believable. And definitely, if you have an idea, write some pages and give it to someone and get their take on it. Are they interested in reading more? Or like, it's not worth doing. Once you do actually get it done, give it to a couple of people to read, see what has to be changed or what their opinion is. Most people that actually have read the book have told me the same thing, and they all say that's better than they were expecting. And I think there's a compliment in there, but it feels like a backhanded slap,
For sure there's a compliment in there, Kevin. Good advice, too. Thanks a lot. Sharon Jones has been an aide to the elderly for almost 30 years, and she's seen some really disturbing things, so she decided to write about the way the elderly are treated based on personal experience and the experience of family and friends. The name of her book is The Elderly Are. How you doing, Sharon? Give me an example of what you're talking about.
We had a nurse choke a resident. It was reported, but nothing was done about it. The nurse got to keep their job. The aide got harassed until she finally quit the job. So some of the stories are from stuff I know about, and some of them are just scenarios to give people a better idea of what they need to do to check on their family members, to protect their family members. Things go on that people don't see.
Do you find that people forget their family members?
Yes. Sometimes they get caught up in their lives and what they have to do, and they totally forget about their family members. But this is the time that the family members need them. It's hard to deal with, but you get used to it in the sense of while you're there, you just try to do the best you can.
What do you advise people to do?
Check up on your family members, visit at different times. Don't give them a routine so they'll know that you're there. Because if you're not present and they know you're not coming to visit at a certain time, they tend to slack on the care, and they take care of the ones who family members they know are showing up at certain times or on certain days. And if you don't have a family member at all, you're usually pushed to the back. So you're usually sitting in feces or urine for a long period of time. Sometimes you're last on the list.
How do people do that, Sharon?
A lack of love. A lack of love.
I mean, you're saying you're an aide. You take care of elderly people. Do other people in your profession just have no feeling, or how can they be that way?
Well, I think some of it is a lack of staffing, because sometimes you have more residents than you're really able to take care of. So you're rushing, trying to do this person and do this person, and you just don't have enough time. And I think the other half is our life situations we bring into the job. But overall, it just boils down to there's no love. And that's just not taking care of the elderly. That's just taking care of people, period.
Is part of the problem the fact that aides don't get paid all that well?
It depends on what you're doing the job for. I don't make very much, but I don't do it according to how I'm getting paid. As long as I do my job and know I'm working for God, every other thing doesn't matter because God's going to take care of the rest. But some people do it because they're not making enough money. You have more residents to take care of than you do the money that's coming in. Because if you're new out of school, sometimes you're usually paid $9, $10 if you're fresh out of school. But if you have a lot of experience, they cut the rate off at a certain point. Most average people in a nursing home, most of them don't have money, and the ones that do they're middle class or lower class people that's pushed in the nursing home. So the book was wrote so no matter where your education is, whether you dropped out of school, whether you went to the 12th grade, whether you went to college, no matter where you stand in education, you can read that book because it's plain and simple and get an understanding.
Thank you, Sharon. To hear your horror stories about nursing homes on the news and from friends, and now, you're writing this firsthand account. It's disturbing in so many ways, Sharon. I hope your book helps somebody. I really do. We are going to take a quick break, and I mean quick, so don't go anywhere. You'll be really sorry. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you. Printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Hey, thanks for coming back for more of the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. How about we go on a journey with John? That's the name of a book of short stories written by John Brooks. Stories he actually submitted to newspapers over the years, and now he finally found the time to put them all together. And he's a fixer, you know what I mean? Like, we're talking literally fixing things, right, John?
Literally fix something. It could be plumbing. It could be trying to take care of putting up Christmas lights. It always seems to turn crazy.
You know what? My sister can fix anything. I can fix nothing. How come it works out that way?
I have no idea. My dad was not a good fixer, and I guess I never learned from him either. And I just have this desire to try to do it, to try to make it work, but things always seem to kind of blow up in my face.
These are stories of how things blew up in your face?
Yes, basically they are. Somebody asked me one time, how do you come up with these ideas? And I said, I just write what happens. It's not a matter of trying to fabricate something. It just kind of happens to me, and so I just write it down.
Give me a story.
Well, one of the things, of course, this is not something that necessarily happened to me. My daughter-in-law, my whole family, we're all runners, and we go to races and things, and we'd given my daughter-in-law some Tiffany earrings. And at these races, they always have a bunch of porta pots and things, and she dropped one of her earrings down in the mess.
Oh.
And so when I found out about it, I told my wife, I said, why didn't you let me know? I could have gotten that back out. And she said, oh, you're not going to be digging in that. And I said, well, it was a Tiffany earring. And she said, well, you're an idiot. So anyway, we were going to the store to try to replace the earrings. And I said, well, why don't we just buy one? And my wife said, well, you can't just buy one. And she said, you don't go to a store like Tiffany's and ask if you can buy just one earring. Well, I still kind of had that on my mind as we went. But we finally got to the store, and we were explaining to the salesperson why we were trying to buy this particular item. And she said, well, you can buy half a pair. And I just started doing a victory dance. I thought, that's great. That's exactly what I want. Well, we ended up buying the whole pair. My wife was not about to let me buy half a pair of earrings. And I told her, I said, I am just sure I could have gotten that earring out if you just let me try. Yeah, stories like that, putting up Christmas decorations.
How do you do with Christmas lights?
Well, the problem is getting all the stuff out of the attic. I mean, eventually I just start throwing things out. It just gets such a time-consuming thing, and then you put them up and they don't work. And one year I was putting up the Christmas lights and I couldn't get them to come on, and I finally realized that my plugs were all laying in a puddle of water, and I blew out all the electrical circuits in our house. You know, they have the tripper that trips if it happens to be in a waterlogged or something. So we were able to finally get the lights on, but it was after a huge problem with just all the water and the electricity and the plugs that won't go on, you know, when it gets water to it. They're safety plugs, and thank goodness they're there. I always put a scripture at the end of the article just to kind of point out some of the things we get all excited about and trying to do, and then realize that, you know, it all kind of comes around. It's not something we ought to be getting upset about. Some of the stories I've talked about, the weather and trying to mow the yard and those kind of things, and people say, well, if you don't like mowing and you don't like the hot weather, why do you live in Texas? And, you know, Texas, although I don't like hot weather, I don't really like the cold weather either. And Texas just seems to be a better place to be than some of the cold weather places. So, you know, a lot of the endings of the article come down to a scripture that just kind of say, you know, you have to kind of take things with a grain of salt. You kind of have to take the good with the bad and just move on. And, of course, God's Word is such a blessing anyway to have. And so the opportunity to share a funny story and then try to tie it up at the end with a meaningful scripture just seemed to make sense to me.
It helps you keep things in perspective.
Yes, it does.
Have you taken it to your church?
I have. It is. We live in just outside Dallas, but we're close to Lake Point Church. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a 25,000 member church, and they have a huge library, and they also have a bookstore inside the church. And I've gotten my book in the bookstore, so it's available there. I've given it to a few friends just to kind of let them see what it was all about. Of course, the articles I started off publishing in a local newspaper, and from there was able to compile a bunch of them and send them into Page, and Page was nice enough to publish it for me.
Nice, John. This is the kind of book I need when I get so frustrated with my computer I want to throw it out the window. I need to pick up a book like this. You ever have times like that? You just get, ugh. Anyway, sometimes you just got to say, so what? Deal with it. It's okay. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Move on. Finally, Mary Therese Grabowski wrote Liberty on the Loose in the White House. Now, she grew up in an Air Force family, so patriotism is in her blood, and she also covered the military as a reporter. So why don't you pick it up from there, Mary?
One day, after I had left the news business and went into the advocacy business for the Air Force up in Washington, D.C., my very young 13-year-old niece wanted to go with me on a trip, and I said, let's plan something, and you're going to learn something. It's not just going to be a vacation. That particular year, Barack Obama had just clinched the Democratic nomination for the presidency, and my niece Samantha and I were in the car listening to the radio. They were talking about potential cabinet members for Barack Obama, and I looked at Sam and I said, Sam, can you tell me who makes up the president's cabinet? And without even a thought, she said, why do I care who makes his furniture? And I almost wrecked the car. So that was the inspiration for this entire series. It's the Spirit of America series, and Liberty on the Loose in the White House is the very first book in that series. And this first book was written well over 7 years ago. And, the premise of the book is that the family goes to the White House. The dog breaks loose, gets past the ticket takers, past security, through Secret Service, and through the front door of the White House. So the dog doesn't go to jail. There's a spoiler alert for you. And it bothers me so much, and at the risk of sounding like my mother, that kids today just don't know the basics. Because when this first became a passion of mine and a labor of love to start writing patriotic children's books, I went to a little survey And for about a 2-month period, I would go into a restaurant, see kids sitting there, and I would ask them, how many of you can tell me the official address of the White House? And my hand to God, I asked over 300 kids this question. Do you know how many got it right? None. And I thought, now, it just kind of started the wheels turning in motion that we can take real, accurate, historic events, and rather than being a thick history book, which most of these kids are not learning about civics and patriotism until they're in the 10th grade when they have a civics class. And that scares me because they're voting in 2 years. They should know all this stuff way before then, and they might actually like it if they knew it at an earlier age. So I'm just taking basic information and putting it into a creative story form because as a reporter, I certainly know how to tell a story.
Well, the important thing is, though, the parents have to buy the books and the kids have to read them. Are they being taught in grammar school in a fun way? No.
You just said it. Make it fun for the kids. And so I already have 25 of these books already. The second one's already off at Page Publishing. It's called America by George. She has to give a report on George Washington, and she dresses up as George Washington, but she wraps George Washington's life so the kids remember it. The thing is, you have to be able to present it in a way that kids are going to enjoy it. So all these patriotic adventures are true as far as the historic knowledge, but the way in which you present it is not just, here's some historic facts to remember. And by the way, at the end of every one of our books, there's a quiz to find out what you just learned.
Well, how are you getting this to the kids?
Oh, we're doing book signings, we're doing readings, we're actually trying to partner with several organizations that focus on patriotism. We're very hopeful that the Daughters of the American Revolution will like what we're doing and be able to talk about this because that's their biggest platform is patriotism in young people. And to me, my dad always said, if you don't know where you came from, you're not going to know where you're going.
Oh, how many times do we have to be reminded of that? Look for the Spirit of America series. You might learn something. I think we learned a lot tonight, don't you? I definitely think, boy, did we have a little bit of everything. Come back next week, same time, same place, 710 WOR, and learn more. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy what's left of your summer, and please start writing.